Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak in this debate. We've had two of the most powerful speeches I've heard in my time in Parliament, and first and foremost, by a country mile, is that by the Honourable Lady, the member for Canterbury, which is one of the bravest and most powerful speeches I've ever heard anywhere, not just in this place, but anywhere, to be perfectly honest. And her contribution to this debate, I think, will be remembered for an awful long time to come, and this debate will be remembered for her contribution to it. Followed hot on the heels by my old friend from Wyre Forest, who also made an incredibly powerful speech regarding his late constituents. And if those examples don't force us into some kind of action, then nothing will. And it's a pleasure to follow on from their speeches. Now, I want to make points that I don't think anyone else will make, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is my role often in these debates. And what I want to try and stop is, when there's been all this sort of consensus, is the idea that we've had through this debate that domestic violence is a gender-based crime. It is not, and we will be doing a huge disservice if we were to run away with that idea and make this piece of legislation work only on that basis. Men are perpetrators of domestic violence. Men are victims of domestic violence. Women are perpetrators of domestic violence. Women are victims of domestic violence. I'm going to go through the figures in a second to show why it isn't gender-based. And we in this House have a duty to treat everybody equally before the law. And I hope that it doesn't matter whether the perpetrator is a man or a woman, they should face the full rigour of the law, and whether the victim's a man or a woman, they should have exactly the same safeguards by this House. And I hope that that's what this legislation will do, and I don't want to hear any ideas that it shouldn't be like that. And just for the record for this, the official figures, the last figures for which are available, show that you are 1.5 times more likely to be a female victim of domestic violence in a lesbian relationship than in a heterosexual relationship. We should not be leaving behind those victims of domestic violence by running away with the idea that it's gender-based. Men are just as likely, 5.1% of men reported being victims of a non-sexual partner abuse with a male partner, which is exactly the same level as women have with a male partner. Men are just as likely to abuse a male partner as they are a female partner. So let's not say this isn't gender-based violence. This is unacceptable violence by all sorts of people, and we should treat them all equally before the law. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Can I thank my honourable friend for giving way? He needs to accept the facts that women are more affected by domestic violence than any other group. Would he not agree with the recommendation of the Joint Committee that rather than putting it on the face of the bill, perhaps for some of the reasons that he's talking about, but that we actually take the approach the government has accepted, that we have statutory guidance to make sure that those who are commissioning services are really clear of the need to reflect the needs of women in the services they provide?
Well, I want all victims to get the services that they need. We've just been hearing on our Women and Equality Select Committee the instances, the male victims of domestic violence. We heard very moving accounts of that recently. We all want to make sure that they get the services that they require too. This isn't about either or. I want to see everybody who is a victim of domestic violence get the treatment and support that they need. And I don't care whether that's a man or a woman, and neither should we in this House. We should want to provide those facilities and services for everybody, whether that's someone who's in a majority category or a minority category is irrelevant. There are two things, Madam Deputy Speaker, having got that on the record, there are two things that I would like, there's much in this bill that I support, and there's some things that I would like to see added to it. And I just want to mention the two things in the time available that I would like to see added to it. One of the things that I've been increasingly troubled by in recent years is the levels of parental alienation, where one parent tries to turn the other parent against the children against the other parents. They use the child as a weapon in their dispute. And this is a growing phenomenon that I certainly see in my surgeries, but also which is well documented. Now, quite clearly, in some cases, particularly where there is domestic violence taking place, it's quite right that the parent is removed from the family and the whole family. And I'm a hardliner on crime, as most people, I think, know, and I will treat perpetrators of domestic violence much more severely in the courts than they are at the moment. But I think that where there is no good reason for a parent to remove the contact of that child from the other parent, I think that parental alienation should in itself be seen as a form of domestic abuse. Because one thing that has come out during this debate, quite rightly, is that the people who are the biggest victims of domestic abuse often are the children. And I think that when a child is deliberately turned against the other parent for no good reason, that should be included in the definition of domestic abuse. The other thing that I think should be included, and I hope that the Minister will consider this. I'm surprised the SNP don't think that that's a particular problem, but that's a matter for them to explain. They ought to meet some parents who suffer from parental alienation. They might realise what a massive issue it is for those. It often leads to suicide amongst people as well, which they ought to think about, those people. The other thing is, when people make a false allegation of domestic abuse, which is also a very, very serious thing, I think the government should consider that also to be a form of domestic abuse in this relationship, in this legislation, because that is one of the most terrible things that somebody could be wrongly accused of. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.